not about me, it's Dr. Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember that moment so well. It was actually could you just I don't. It doesn't look my slides are up here yet, but
Where's Bill?
what I'm going to talk about here is well, it's a concept that I never heard about. Yeah, I want you to take a second here. I'll just call up my slides because I depend on them highly because I have no memory. But I'm going to let's see. We exit show. There we go. Let's see. That's the way to do this. Escape. Unfortunately, I'm not a Mac guy. It is on the Mac. Okay. Oh, not right. I did that. That's okay. That's okay. I can double click on it and where am I? There we go. Achieve injustice. Almost there. Just got to get to play. That's just going to maximize. I need to start the
I'll get it
slideshow.
going for you.
Okay. Beautiful. There we go. Excellent.
Told you I wasn't good at this one. Thanks, Scott.
Oh, I need the remote. All I need now is the remote.
Is it on the...
No. Ah, there it is. Got it. Look at that. Ready to roll. So, yeah, this is a... okay, it's not turned on. There we go. Timed out. Hey, there we go. So, I want to tell you about the discovery of perceived injustice as a concept. This is not something which is very well known at all. Okay? It came as a surprise to me that this concept was out there. And, relatively recently, which at this point is probably about 9 years ago. But it's still not something, you hear about very much, even in professional circles. So this is not a well-recognized idea at this point. So I used to do a lot of auto insurance examinations. So this is how I get to this idea. So I want to sort of pull you out for a second from this world of the first responder. We're going to go into a different world of the motor vehicle accident victim and a whole different system. So most of what I was doing was what were called post-104, which is 2 years after the event, hence 104 weeks. Why aren't these people getting better? And the insurance, these people weren't back at work, they weren't functioning well. The insurance company could send them for a whole round of assessments. And that's the assessment that I would do. So I was Darth Vader. I'd go in there, with the Imperial March and, representing the insurer. Now, that is not the way I ever approached these assessments. People were often afraid that, I was there representing the insurer, and I think that a lot of insurance examiners did that. I never did. I went in there objectively, and, if anything, if I had a bias anywhere, it came out of the fact that I did a lot of clinical work with these people and I understood their pain. By about 2008, I'd completed about 100 of these. And I started to sit back and think about these assessments that I'd done because I was picking up an interesting pattern. Now, if you think about motor vehicle accidents, most accidents involve two vehicles. There's going to be a few single vehicle accidents, there's going to be a few multi-vehicle accidents. Let's say, roughly speaking, that they cancel each other out. All of these numbers I'm about to talk to you about here are about as rough can get. Okay, these are numbers I'm literally yanking out of my butt. So I assess only very few passengers, so the vast number of people I'm researching for some reason are drivers, okay? Not a lot of passengers were getting referred, which is kind of interesting in itself. Apparently Ontarians don't do a lot of carpooling. So let's assume, roughly speaking, that if all this works out, there should be approximately an equal probability if you're driving the car, you're the driver at fault versus you're the driver not at fault. There should be an equal probability of being injured in the car accident. Okay? So very roughly, 50% of drivers, injured drivers would be at fault, 50% in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? Logically. What do I actually find? So here's my sample. People who are still struggling 2 years after the accident. Most have both physical and psychological injuries. That's why they're being referred to a psychologist. A few have only psychological injuries. And the results are 95% were the drivers who were not at fault in the accident. 95%. Okay? That is a mind-blowing number, even for horrible numbers that would never stand up scientifically like this. This is unbelievable. So I started searching. I'm thinking, there's got to be something going on here. What is this phenomenon that I'm witnessing that is explaining this phenomenon? And I go online and I start typing in things. I had a sense it was something to do with justice, the feeling of, something's been done wrong to me, right? And so I, tried typing justice and PTSD into a search engine. 30,000 hits. Well, that's no good. I can't find it, right? As luck would have it, and this is extraordinary luck, around the same time as I'm having these thoughts scratching my head, at McGill University, there's a psychologist by the name of Michael Sullivan, okay? Canadian psychologist studying, of all things, motor vehicle accident victims. And he's studying recovery following physical injuries. He's looking at exactly the population that I'm looking at. He develops this thing he calls the Injustice Experience Questionnaire. Now, Sullivan is a brilliant researcher. He has a fatal flaw. His fatal flaw is he likes short questionnaires. Okay? So he has this 12-item questionnaire, looks at the unnecessary suffering as a result of another's actions, violation of basic human rights. These are sources of perceived injustice. The experience of irreparable loss, the challenge to our just world beliefs. I think, did I skip a slide there? No, I didn't. Okay. So, the accuracy of perceived injustice. The word perceived is not to be heard as phony. It's not to be heard as inaccurate. It's not to be heard as biased. You are experiencing yourself sitting in a chair right now. Okay? That's a perfectly accurate experience. Okay? So, perception is not inaccurate. It simply means that in that person's judgment, there has been an injustice. Now, the process I'm describing here is an unconscious process. What is the impact of perceived injustice? Well, the IEQ predicts prolonged disability following physical injuries independent of the severity of the injury. Okay? Think about this. That little 12-item questionnaire did a better job of predicting how long this person would be off work than the severity of the physical injury at the time of the accident. Among those scoring at the 75th percentile on this, 76 remained unemployed 1 year after the injury. 74% described themselves as totally disabled for occupational related activities. Okay? 70% were moderately depressed. At least moderately depressed. 2009, he does another sort of follow-up study. He looks at 112 people suffering from whiplash, soft tissue injuries. They're referred to a multidisciplinary rehab program. He looks at pain, PTSD, physical function, and pain-related psychological variables. He finds that the indicators of pain severity don't contribute to the persistence of PTSD. Only perceived injustice emerged as a unique predictor of the persistence of PTSD symptoms. Okay? So, how does this thing work? What we know is this. If you have a higher level of perceived injustice, if you think that something deeply unfair happened to you in that accident, it interferes with both your psychological and physical recovery. And it's incredibly powerful. Okay? How does it work? Here's my theory of how this thing works. Okay? Justified bitterness. I want you to think for a moment about the outcomes of running a stop sign. Okay? They run from the trivial to the fatal. From absolutely nothing at all to minor embarrassment if somebody saw you, to a ticket, to an accident with property damage, to an accident that causes injury, to an accident that causes death. Now, we tend to think of the last one as being the worst, obviously, right? We separate these things in law. We have negligence, and we have negligence causing death, right? We say, well, one is worse than the other, right? It's bad to be negligent. It's even worse to cause somebody's death when you're negligent. But the driving error is identical across all these conditions, okay? We feel intensely that the greater the injury, the greater injustice has been done to us. If I'm not injured, your action is trivial. If I am injured, your action is not trivial. So my injury is the proof of just how wrong what it is that you did to me. Okay? Which kind of leads to this bizarre and really irrational conclusion. If I get better, it's like I'm letting you off the hook. Now, this is an unconscious process. Okay? Here are some features of the events that tend to make this perceived injustice even worse. First of all, the severity of the outcome. Okay? The worse I am injured, the more I feel that what you did to me was wrong. If there is a criminal act involved, it's one thing to be hit by someone who runs a stop sign by mistake. It's another thing to be hit by someone who's drunk. It's another thing to be hit by someone who's an unlicensed driver, someone who's stolen a car. Betrayal of trust, okay? It's one thing to be injured, right? It's another thing to be abused in a relationship, which is supposed to be a protective one. This is a fascinating one to me, and I think it's so, so important. And this is something that, Sullivan's questionnaire at 12 items totally misses. The mere presence of a child, okay? I've seen situations, the mere thought of the possible presence of a child. My kid could have been with me in the car. That thought is going to increase the probability of somebody developing PTSD after a motor vehicle accident. I saw a case once, the insurers would love to send me, this information to try to influence me, right? Usually they don't send the photos of the accident to the psychologist because I don't have any expertise in evaluating how much force a car was hit with. This case had one with a zoom in on the tiny little scuff on the back bumper that was caused by the accident in which this person was rear-ended. No other damage. And this person's claiming this psychological injury. And the insurance company, of course, they ask me their objective questions, but I can read between the lines. What the question really is give me a break. How could somebody be psychologically injured out of an accident like this? So I do this assessment with this lady. She was a refugee, war-torn country, okay? Sitting in her car at a stop, traffic has come to a stop. She gets bumped from behind. Her child screams. The child was fine, but the child screams. Boom. Right? And now she's terrified of being in the car again. No doubt that tied into previously existing trauma, but the injury is she was never afraid of being in the car before. Right? The failure of the perpetrator to take responsibility. One of the cases that really sticks with me on this one is a lady. She was a lovely lady. She was so much fun to work with because she was so mad. she was a real fiery little personality. And she's driving down the road. Classic example of the old guy, gets confused with the pedals in the car, means to hit a brake, hits the gas instead, shoots out of the parking lot, smacks into her. They're sitting it's a cold day, they're both sitting in the back of the cruiser together. She's shaking and upset, right? He leans over, pats her on the knee, and says, there, dear, these things happen.
No.
She was not happy with that statement. Invalidation, okay? Oh, give me a break, get over it. It's not that big of a deal, right? You should be back at work already. You're faking it, you're milking it. How do we resolve perceived injustice? The relation between perceived injustice and adverse pain outcomes has been demonstrated in a wide range of pain conditions, Sullivan says. But perceptions of injustice do not appear to respond to current treatment approaches. Well, of course they don't, because we never ask about them. Okay? Try asking about them, see what happens. Sullivan also suggests this. We need a paradigm shift. We need to broaden the targets of assessment and intervention beyond the perceptions of the injured individuals to include potential external sources of injustice. For example, the employer, the insurer, the healthcare provider. No kidding. Because this is where so much of this really comes from. Okay? The employer, the insurer, the healthcare provider, the manager. Okay? This is where so much of this begins to arise. In the auto insurance world, there's only a few potential bad guys. There's the driver who's at fault. There's the insurer who denies the benefits and the treatment. Okay? There can be neighbors and people judging you for milking it and all this kind of a thing too, I suppose. When the insurer denies benefits and treatment, we can understand this as sanctuary trauma. Now, a sanctuary trauma occurs when an individual expects they will receive comfort, compassion, and help in a situation of trust, but then experiences abuse instead. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Actually, State Farm's not bad. Okay, I've worked with State Farm, one of the better ones. Okay, I think it's changed their name. I can't remember what they're called now. But I always advise people, by the way, two things since I'm on this topic of motor vehicle accidents. One, talk to your broker, buy the additional coverage, get the optional benefits. If you don't realize what the government has done and the insurance industry has done to your motor vehicle accident benefits over the past few years, they have been slashed. But for a few dollars a year, you can bring them back up. Oh, that is so worth it, okay? And almost nobody does that because they're not telling us. Do you want these optional benefits that will cost us a whole lot more money? Yeah, they don't do that. Who has acted unjustly? In the operational stress injury, the potential bad guys include the perpetrator of the act, the Special Investigations Unit if you're a police officer, the media, the employer, your peers who are going to cast judgment on you, the long-term disability insurer who's going to deny the claim, WSIB who's going to deny the claim. These are a lot of potential bad guys who are saying to you, your injury isn't real. These are a lot of people who have the potential to betray you when you count on them being there at your back. That's why I love that phrase, I've got your back, because this is what it's all about. Sanctuary trauma leaves the individual feeling profoundly invalidated. The message is, your pain isn't real. Okay? Your pain isn't real. This is a real Facebook post somebody sent to me with the identity removed, fortunately. I hope that the poster isn't in the room. Don't get me started on this shit. $100,000 to count paper clips while the rest of us work our asses off because the platoons are depleted. Some are genuine and legitimate, but most are a bunch of dog fuckers. That's what stigma looks like. If you don't know what stigma looks like, that's a good example. Okay? Now, I always like to point out, we've actually made huge progress here, and this does represent this, because this person says some people are actually genuine and legitimate. We've made huge strides in overcoming stigma, right? We should be very proud of that. My goodness. By the way, I used to think that counting paper clips was a metaphor, right? I thought it was a metaphor for, useless work for the accommodated worker, right? Then I met a firefighter who was actually required to count paper clips, right? Punitive, embarrassing, demeaning workplace accommodations. My God, what are these people thinking? Do you realize most of what I do, okay, is the trauma's easy. We can take care of the trauma. Take care of the workplace environment. Try to get somebody back to a workplace where they feel that they have been abused, that's damn near impossible. That is nearly impossible, and it's very unlikely to be successful. So you talk about trying to save money. My God, start here. Treat people with compassion. So what the insurance world does, and I include WSIB and all this part, defending against fraud through assessment. We have to prove that there's an actual accident, there's an actual injury, that the symptoms are related to the events, right? We have to make sure that the people who are paying for something for which they are actually at fault and responsible. So we put people through assessments. And then we put them through some more assessments. And then we put them through some more assessments. Think of what happens, as Gary was saying, every time you have to be assessed, okay? You now have to prove that you are sick, okay? Think of the mindset that this creates in the injured party, okay? Mindsets can be incredibly powerful, okay? Here's two mindsets for you. Both of them are completely accurate. PTSD is dangerous. I could end up killing myself. PTSD is something I can overcome. I can grow through this experience. Which one of those people do you think is more likely to get healthy? Right? And yet, we put people through these assessments, and each time we're asking them to prove to us you're still sick. That's going to keep people sick, right? And the auto insurance world loves this because they think they're saving money by denying treatment. But even more importantly, okay, you get into a car accident, they don't actually care that much about whether or not you're malingering. They're going to put you through the ringer to make sure that it's not easy to malinger, because if they don't do that, then many people will malinger, and it actually does happen, right? In Toronto, specifically in certain communities that are actually involved in organized crime and actually fake accidents and, you know, oh my God, it's a whole mess. But it's Toronto, and then all of Ontario ends up paying for it. So the individual has to double down on their own symptoms in order to keep proving them again and again and again. Conflicts with insurers. The WSIB tribunal system, if you know, let's say WSIB decides to cut you off your benefits, no problem. You're able to appeal that decision. It'll only take 1 to 3 years. Okay? So you're often living with no income, right? How do you get better when you need your symptoms to prove that you're sick? Imagine this scenario, okay? You get cut off, you go to the appeal board, 3 years later, you're sitting there in front of the tribunal, you're healthy, you're strong, you're fully put together, you've received great treatment, and you say, yeah, I feel absolutely fantastic. In fact, I think I've grown as a human being through this. But let me tell you, I was really bad back then 3 years ago. Is that person going to win that appeal? Of course not, right? They're going to say, of course this person should have been cut off. Look how good they're doing, right? Now, this is entirely distinct from malingering. I'm talking about unconscious processes that keep people sick. I'm talking about mindsets that will keep people sick, not a choice to remain sick. This is nothing about this is a choice, okay? It's a demand of the system. It's how the system prevents healing. So the mistreatment of disabled people carries a huge cost. It increases the severity of disability, it increases the duration of disability. It interferes with recovery from injury, both physical and psychological. And when people feel invalidated and rejected, they are less likely to heal. So what is the cure? Well, on the individual level, in treatment, we need to target the anger and the bitterness, right? We need to practice acceptance. We need to practice forgiveness, okay? We need to practice letting go. You need to recognize that you do this for yourself, not for the perpetrator. And the perpetrator here, very broadly defined, okay? Maybe that's the person who shot you, if you're Bill Rusk, right? But for most, it's going to be the employer, WSIB, the auto insurer, the system, right? On a systemic level, huge money goes into preventing malingering, okay? Through independent evaluations, through surveillance. Oh my God, don't get me started on surveillance. Jeez. What the hell do they hope to prove by following a depressed person with a camera? Oh my God, they were laughing? Anything, I tell this to people, anything that you do that looks bad on a videotape, you tell them you were following my advice. Blanket. Okay? You go out, you enjoy yourself, you're spending time with your friends, you're smiling, you're happy, you're shopping. You are doing your homework from your psychologist because that's what I want you to do. That's how you're going to get better. The legal costs. These are recovered not only through the exposure of fraud through these assessments, but as I was saying before, through the prevention of future fraud in the population as a whole. Okay? But what about the increase in future costs of care? Right? The more this system keeps people from healing, the more it costs the entire system. Okay? And they actually, you know, I have this wonderful friend who's an insider in WSIB, and she's saying when she came on board, she realized there was this mindset in the WSIB that like the psychologists were out there sort of trying to keep people from getting better in order to keep their income. I'm like, seriously? Do you have any idea how much I love it when someone moves off my caseload? That's like my biggest, that's why I do this job. Number one, my biggest stress, number two, is my waiting list. Right? Anytime I can move a name off my waiting list, I'm like, oh, finally! Moved one off my waiting list yesterday, November 2016. I'm loving it when people get back to work. So, insurer and employer actions that may increase perceived injustice. Accusations of sick leave abuse, right? Denial of claims when fraud is suspected before it is even proven. Okay? Guy tells me this thing. The employer has requested his medical brief from WSIB. They have to complete a form. Okay? It says, why are you requesting the medical brief? What is the reason for appealing the WSIB's decision? Why are you seeking the brief? The employer was beautifully honest. The answer was, none. We want to see if there's any grounds for an appeal. That's a bit wordy. Why not just say fishing expedition? Because that's what it is, right? Loss of income replacement, excessive reliance on the tribunal system. You know, when you see 80% of decisions that go to tribunal being overturned, there's reason to suspect that the original decision-making process may be just slightly biased. 80% of claims denied for pre-existing conditions are later reversed. So these things impede healing, they impede recovery, and they impede the return to work process. The bottom line is this: compassionate care may end up saving money. And this, of course, is why, you know, the Bill 163 has been so hugely important, right? Things really are changing. I'm very, very pleased to say, you know, I was president of the Ontario Psychological Association for a year, and over the course of that year, I was only there for a brief time, you know, and I didn't have a lot of time to devote to the role, unfortunately. But one thing that I really did accomplish, and I felt very, very proud of this, is started working much more effectively with WSIB, and they're listening. They're starting to get it. So there is, in fact, a genuine shift happening at WSIB where they are starting to be a lot more open and a lot more reasonable to deal with. Not exclusively, as you know, as you all know, as you deal with changing the culture in your own workplaces, culture changes slowly, right? But things are happening. So there is good news. Thanks very much.